Passionate, driven, enthusiastic, euphoric. This is who we are as entrepreneurs. But how we leverage these incredible attributes to dream and build businesses that scale and grow is what this podcast is all about. Hello, I'm attorneypreneur Josh Brown, and welcome to Franchise Euphoria. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Franchise Euphoria, the podcast where we are focused on providing strategy, education, and consulting to the incredible and growing franchise community. Welcome, everyone. Josh Brown here. Hope everyone is doing fan-freaking-tastic. Home-based franchises. You know, these have really blown up over the last few years. I think it goes hand in hand with the whole idea of a lot of people just want to work from home. I think it's easier. I think it's viable now. And the market, I think, will prove that out. It is easier than ever to launch a business from your home than ever before. But the thing is, with a home-based franchise, I mean, they run the gamut. You have tutoring franchises, you have cleaning franchises, vending machine franchises, coaching systems, senior care services. I mean, they really run the gamut in terms of offerings out there for your home-based franchise. But you got to be really, really careful. And I put together 5 things to look into before you buy a home-based franchise system, because quite frankly, they can be very, very attractive because they're not that expensive, especially as compared to a normal, or not even a normal, but to a regular retail brick and mortar franchise system where the cost is a lot higher because you have the build out of the brick and mortar store. Whereas for a home-based franchise, you're essentially buying their brand. You're buying their name recognition, you're buying their systems and their ongoing support. So 5 things that you must look into before you buy one of these. First of all, how long have they been in business? You know, there's a lot of these systems that keep popping up, almost like they're popping up overnight, turning themselves into franchises and then selling themselves as if they have something significant to offer. And my honest opinion on that is most franchise systems, if the underlying business has not been around for a while, it's probably not going to have that much to offer. Now, there are certainly exceptions to that, but most businesses that last in franchising have evolved their system and built up their brand over time. Many businesses, before they would even consider the franchise model, would have, in the brick and mortar sense, at least 2 locations operating. So they've proven out a system. Now they can go into the franchise model where they really have something to offer. Well, you don't necessarily have that when you're looking at the home-based franchise systems. So I think you need to be really, really careful about that and definitely dive in and find out how long they have been in business, find out if they have changed their systems at all through the course of time of how long they've been in business, but definitely look at that component of it because it can raise some red flags. Number 2, what documents and flow systems do you actually get in exchange for your franchise fee and any other fees that they're charging you? You know, it's so important when you're buying a home-based franchise to really, really pay attention to that, because in some instances, you're paying a lot of money to essentially get an initial series of documents that lays out the system, and that's it. I mean, you don't get the ongoing training, you don't get the ongoing support, because in some of these, quite frankly, there's just not much that's there to be ongoing for. And so after a while, you might start questioning yourself and saying, why am I paying back this royalty on a continuing basis when really I'm not getting any more support for this system? So it's really important to know not just what you're getting at the outset, but what you're going to get on a continuous basis. Number 3, online presence and online strategy. This is huge, not only for home-based franchises, but for the franchise sector in whole. But we're going to focus today just on the home-based franchises. I can't tell you how important it is to have a really, really clear idea of the online presence and strategy of your home-based franchisor before you buy the franchise. So you need to know not only what they're doing online? How are they utilizing their website? How are they utilizing social media to further the brand recognition, to further the franchise's goals? And then most importantly, how are they leveraging that to help their franchisees? There's a big divide in franchising right now where you have the franchisors in some instances doing a lot to promote the national brand, but very little to support the franchisees in their local areas. And for your purposes, especially when you have a home-based franchise, oh boy, you really, really need to get that support. I mean, that can be some of the most valuable things that your franchisor can do for you, especially when you do not have a brick and mortar location. It is going to be absolutely key that you dominate in the online game and you dominate in social media and you find that way to engage. And you must know where your franchisor stands from that perspective. Number 4, and I touched upon this a little bit earlier, and it's kind of touched upon this throughout, is the actual continuing support that you get. In any franchise system, it's important, but especially in a home-based system where, as an example, with a tutoring franchise, there's lots of great tutoring franchise systems out there, but you need to make sure that you're getting updated documentation on a continuous basis. You need to make sure that they're constantly working to make the system more efficient and better for you as the franchisees. As I said, you need to know what they are actually doing to help you along the way. Really, from a perspective of you want to make sure that you're just not paying a bunch of money and a continuing royalty just to get the information up front. Because if that's all you're getting, quite frankly, it's not a good system. Number 5, you really need to compare everything that you're getting and the totality of the system against what the upfront fee is. I hear a lot of people and I speak with a lot of people who get really enticed by the home-based franchise because they've researched the franchise industry and they see how expensive it can be to get into a traditional franchise model. And then when they see, a franchise for under $10,000, I mean, it's exciting. I think it leads people sometimes, though, to believe that they can get this fantastic system, fantastic support for $10,000, and they're going to be on their way to success. It's really not going to work out that way. And any business you have, whether it's home-based, whether it's brick and mortar, takes effort, takes work. And in some instances, your home-based franchise may be harder than a brick and mortar franchise. After all, you're going to have to deal with distractions. You're going to have to really be the type of person who's organized and focused and scheduled and can make sure to balance everything so that you're focused on your business at the right times. I have definitely seen situations where people buy home-based franchises and then they wonder 6 months, a year out why they've gone broke. Well, they've never taken the time to schedule out their days. They've never taken the time to put their own goals in place. Yeah, they have the systems that the franchisor has provided to them. Yeah, they have the documentation and they have something that they can provide, but they weren't organized enough themselves. They weren't disciplined enough themselves to actually make that happen. So that's really, really important. And you just need to really factor all of that into what you are actually getting in exchange for the fee. So anyways, those are the 5 things to look for or look into before you buy a franchise. Again, let me just recap. How long have they been in business? Number 1. Number 2, what documents and systems do you actually get? Number 3, their online presence and online strategy. Number 4, what kind of continuing support do you get? And number 5, compare all of this stuff against the upfront franchise fee. How you take your hobby and turn it into a business. Now, I know this doesn't directly relate to a franchisee or a franchisor, but so many people take their hobbies, turn them into businesses, and then realize that they can scale and grow those businesses through a franchise or franchise-like model. But it's so key in doing that you get started off on the right foot. I mean, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and startup entrepreneurs that are creatives by nature. And I love that. I mean, I love working with people who are passionate about what they do. There's just simply no substitute for them. They're fun to work with, they're energized, they're enthusiastic. And so I love that. And most creative entrepreneurs that I've worked with all have a great amount of passion. But so many of them don't really focus on how do you turn that hobby into a business. Well, once they realize that, wow, I've really got this skill, this expertise in doing something, and now I can turn it into a viable business. And perhaps most importantly, now I want to turn it into a viable business. That's when I love to work with them, because now they've realized, okay, now they want to leverage their expertise and help even more people by doing what they do, putting it out there to the world. And what a great thing to do. But again, if you don't do it the right way, it can be frustrating, because anytime you go from just doing something as a hobby where you're not really concerned whether you're making any money to now turning it into a business, well, now you've got to do certain things to make sure that you're profitable. So here are 4 immediate steps that you can do to turn your hobby into a business. Number 1, limit and focus. So a lot of creative people, even if they have a particular hobby, there's a lot that goes into the hobby, and maybe it's a little bit generalized, or maybe it encompasses doing a lot of different things depending on what people ask them to do. But it's so important when you're going to turn your hobby into a business to figure out, what is it about your hobby that you really love? What is the one thing that if you had to get rid of everything else, you would say, I absolutely love this about what I do? That's what I'm talking about when I say limit and focus. That's how focused you need to be. You need to identify what exactly it is. And then you can start to figure out how to leverage that and turn that into a business. Number 2, once you've limited and focused, now you've got to write it down. Now you've got to write down and outline a step-by-step account of what it is that goes in to doing your hobby. Whether you're making golf clubs, whether you're making hunting equipment. I don't know. It runs the gamut for any kind of hobby, whether you're making any kind of arts and crafts devices. You need to have a step-by-step outline of what it is you do. You really have to write it down. It's not really the sexy part of turning your hobby into a business, but it's so necessary. And trust me, once you take the time to write down step-by-step what you're doing, review it, plug in the holes, you'll start figuring out, what about this? I forgot to add this in. Go back, plug it in. It's such a great process to go to. It really gets you crystal clear on what it is you're actually doing. Number 3, what is your value proposition? In other words, it's great to have a hobby. It's great to create art. It's great to create work. But what is it, and what does it mean to people? In other words, what is somebody else going to find value in? You must understand that before you turn your hobby into a business. And doing so will identify who your target market is. If you know what your value proposition is, if you know who this is targeted for, in other words, if you know that, wow, this is what I do and these are the type of people who would be interested in it, well, you've just identified your target market. Number 4, you really need to come up with a launch strategy. So after you've limited and focused what you're doing, after you write it down, after you have a clear understanding of your value, of your why should somebody care? Why should somebody pay for what you are doing? Then you need to figure out, how am I going to launch this thing? Most people who want to turn their hobbies into a business really want to bootstrap it. And I think that's great. I think that's fine. But in order to bootstrap it the smart way, you need to have a launch strategy and figure out, is this the type of product where you're going to leverage the online space to sell it? Do you need to build out a website? Do you need to build out an e-commerce site that's a part of your website? Is this a visual type product? Do you need to be considering, social media sites? Do you need such as Pinterest? And maybe if it's more picture based, you'd want to look at Pinterest and Facebook and Twitter and Google Plus and all of them. You just really need to map that out. And here's the thing: you may not be able to do all that yourself, but there's a lot of information online, and there's a lot of people who you can turn to who will give you pointers for that, and it shouldn't cost that much. I think one of the important things about a launch strategy is that it can be very, very easy to think that you have to launch everywhere at the same time. And I know some people have had great success with that. I just firmly believe that you should try to figure out what's going to be the best place for you to launch. In other words, if you're selling something, maybe you create golf clubs, right? And you want to provide discount golf clubs that are homemade and that are really, really fine-tuned. Well, that's something that somebody's going to want to see a picture of, And so you're going to want to think in terms of, okay, if people want to see a picture of this, where would they go to see pictures? Well, you're going to want to utilize, that's going to be part of your strategy in figuring out, okay, how am I going to launch this? Obviously, I'm going to have to put together a website. I'm going to have videos and pictures, and what social media site is going to be best for this kind of a thing. That's the kind of exercise that I'm talking about going through when you're coming up with a launch strategy. But I want you to understand that all of these steps really, if you're focused and you're intent on turning your hobby into a business, really by following these 4 steps, you can take it there. In terms of setting up the business and doing those sorts of things, absolutely, you will still need to do that, and that comes later. But before you actually do that, you really, really need to get focused. You need to write it down. You need to have the clear value that you are going to be providing, and you need to have your launch strategy figured out. If you don't have those 4 things figured out, you're going to be spinning your wheels, and you're going to be wasting a lot of time, energy, and probably money on things that you otherwise shouldn't be because you're not clear in what you're doing. Hopefully this was helpful for you today. If you are in the market for a franchise, I would highly encourage you to check out my free ebook, which is What to Know Before You Buy a Franchise. You can head over to my website at that's INDY franchiselaw.com and download it there for free. And let me know what you think. If you're enjoying this podcast, if you're enjoying the value that you're getting from this podcast, I'd also invite you to go to iTunes and provide me with a rating and review. It always helps for visibility on the podcast. So thank you so much for your support, and hope this episode was helpful to you.
Thanks for being with us today on the Franchise Euphoria podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to go to iTunes and provide a review. Also, please remember that although Josh Brown is a licensed and practicing attorney, nothing contained in this podcast should be construed as legal advice, because it is not. The information contained in this podcast is general and educational in nature, and none of it should be relied upon as legal advice. That being said, if you have questions for Josh and would like to contact him, please email him at josh@franchiseeuphoria.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you tune in to our next weekly episode.